Hello and welcome to the T-Force LCS Rundown, episode 46. This is week 1.
Oh, what is this? This is nice.
Greg, you haven't been here since we added music to the beginning.
I keep forgetting about it. I'm like...
A lot of love in the room.
About a lot of loving about to happen.
If we ever show up on time, we have to sit here for an extra 10 minutes just doing this. Just so that people are like, we don't want
Just
to raise your
bouncing.
expectations or anything. Get you used to us starting on time.
Just bounce into the music. Well, that music was actually brought to us by Twitch's new music service. I think it's music.twitch.tv. It's actually this nice little library of free music that you can use on your streams and such. And it's got a lot of artists on there and a lot of great music. So expect some really crazy tracks from that coming
Are they all
up.
that sexy?
They are mostly. I picked the sexiest one. The song's called Bow Ties. So
They
you
have
can't-
to be sexy, otherwise all of the people with the cleavage cams and stuff wouldn't get nearly as many viewers.
Well, speaking of twitch.tv, we are live shortly after 9 p.m. On twitch.tv/tforcepodcast. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TrinityForcePodcast.com, on Twitter, at LCS Rundown. You can email us, too, and we'll get it now, because we straightened that out. We had changed the password to the email account, and then I never bothered to update it, even though I got told about the password change. So we got like 80,000 emails this week. That kind of sucked. But we get those now, so that's LCS at TrinityForcePodcast.com. You can also give us a call, leave us a voicemail. That's 978-378-0257. So this is week 1. The LCS started. We're here, and we're actually getting games in. And what a week. This week, to join me in discussion, we've got Greg Credible Mushroom.
What's up?
We have Tom, Optimist Tom.
Yeah, I have 2 Toms in my name now. That's how awesome I am now.
Tom, Optimist Tom. And we have Seifa. He doesn't get a first name this week.
No, I don't want one.
That's just the mood I'm in.
You're like Prince. Next week you'll just be a symbol.
The artist.
I was
form
already a
of
symbol.
Seifa.
The artist for me.
Wow, hipster
All right.
Prince. I was a symbol before it was going in.
You love it, Tom. Shut up.
El symbol.
Mitch is playing like volleyball or something.
Frisbee. Ultimate Frisbee.
Ultimate Frisbee. Yeah. So, wow. Where to even begin with this week? We had some really cool things come out with the new LCS season starting. We started off with pretty much a rule update. Riot now has an official spot where you can go and check out all of the rule changes to the LCS, as well as locations where the PDF for the current rules can be found. But they structured it really nice so you can really understand what's changed over time and see what the rules are. We'll probably end up reviewing a lot of these rules as they become relevant, but the one thing that you're going to most see active is definitely a big highlight on coaches, as we saw in the streams this week. I saw that the coaches are always there standing behind the team. They actually have to wear like formal clothing. That is all regulated by Riot. They tell them they have to be business casual, and they're actually a lot more present, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
I love that some of the coaches look like... Some of them look like, like 17 or 18-year-old kids, and they're like in the suits, and the suits are a little too big for them. And then there's like the older coaches who are like very well dressed and look like super serious. And I love that contrast because I never feel like the two teams playing both have an older coach who is like very well dressed, clearly like knows what he wants to get when he's buying dress clothes, and the other guy in a suit that's too big for him. Like those, it always matches up that way, and it makes me laugh.
The best is when Fnatic and H2K played against each other, because H2K has Prolly, and I'm pretty sure he's wearing like one of Broken Shard's old suits because it's way too big for him. He looks dapper as fuck in it, but he looks way too big for him. And then Fnatic's coach looks like one of the band members from OK Go, with like the little bald spot and the facial hair wrapping around, and like the super suit with like the tuxedo vest and everything.
Oh my god.
It's like night and day contrast.
I absolutely loved during Primetime League, which we'll talk about in just a second, when they showed the CLG roster and then Scarra was just like highlighted on top of them looking down in a nice little suit. That was pretty awesome. Lord Skara reigning over them all.
Savior of the NALCS.
We'll see. Not based on CLG's first round of performance, if you ask me. But that kind of brings us to our next point, is that Riot's putting out basically what is an extended pre-show, but before the LCS actually starts around ANEU, they've got a nice little show that they put together, Primetime League. They cover, a bunch of different topics, kind of similar to what we're doing here. Just like us as well, they had lots of technical problems for their first episode, but they put together a nice little thing. They go over rosters, changes. They have all different sorts of segments. It was pretty nice. You guys catch that?
Yeah, I'm really surprised that they had technical difficulties, and the specific technical difficulty that they had. Well, the specific technical difficulty they had was it was a little convenient. I don't know. It built a lot of hype. That's what I'm going to say. It built a lot of hype. I would say I was not interested in that show at all until he said the F word on camera, and then I was like, well, all right. Now I'm curious to see how much of a train wreck this is. That was the technical difficulty, man. You missed that? That was the best one.
No, I remember when I first turned it on, they started talking, and then I think it was it Zyrene was like, oh, no, hold on. Wait, can we start over again? And then it just cut to a splash screen and was off for 30 or 45 seconds, and then they started over. I don't know if that was them doing it live and something was going on or what, but can't be a production in esports without some interruption, I suppose.
See, the problem is, unlike LCS and Challenger level games, specifically Challenger level games, you don't have a reason to pause in the middle of a live show when there's no game going on. So just in spirit of League of Legends, they had to put a pause in the broadcast. That's what I'm going with. That's why I'm thinking they did it.
We had plenty of pauses this week.
Yeah, there were a lot of equipment difficulties, and bouncing off of the new LCS rule set. Obviously, we don't want to go way too deep into it because there's a lot of technical crap, and most of it honestly is not that interesting to talk about. But one of the things is they have to use brand new peripherals that they have to keep at the studio. This is obviously to cut down on. We haven't seen this in NAEU in League of Legends, but we've seen it in some other games. We've seen it, of course, in some online tournaments, and we've seen it actually in the CIS region, unfortunately, where third-party tools are being either installed on the drivers of the mice and keyboards or being installed on the computers to help teams get a unfair advantage. So using illegal programs like that, one of the rules now basically states that they have to give Riot a set of peripherals that are still in the box and all brand new for them to use for the LCS. So week one, there's a lot of driver stuff.
2 sets.
Is it 2
one's
sets?
Broken.
Well, then there you go. But week one, everybody was basically using brand new equipment. So there was a lot of things like this driver wasn't installed or this keyboard was not working in a certain USB slot. And the time tallies just kind of added up.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like this is going to be a
like,
financial strain or anything like that to the teams.
No, not at all.
Their sponsors provide all this crap anyway, so nothing much.
But now it all looks nice and fancy and shiny for the first time. Just wait until like week 9 when they're all dirty and grimy.
I'm sure they'll just keep replacing them out.
Probably.
Yeah. Speaking of new things that Riot put out, we also got, and I didn't really see them push this too heavy, but they got watch.lolesports.com. Did anybody check this thing out yet?
Is it the little statistics thing underneath and the little ticker stuff going on?
Yeah, so
they
never
made like a full formal announcement for that, but I believe it kicked off during Worlds last year. A lot of people just watch the broadcast on YouTube or Twitch, but if you go to the direct LOL Esports website, it defaults to the main front page like when the broadcast is live, and there's like a stats ticker underneath. There's a lot of cool, like I believe there's tweet interaction that follows down there too, and you can still choose if you want to watch Twitch, YouTube, Azubu, etc., but it's through the LOL Esports website, so you get all these little added benefit stuff, which is really cool.
Now, are you seriously telling me right now that has been going on for over a year?
No, it's probably been going on for a couple of months. I think it was like a brand new feature for Worlds. Like that was like the testing grounds, but I guess they just kept it around. Because I remember watching the broadcast on LOL Esports and it was there, and I was like, well, this makes my job pretty easy.
No, I never realized that, because not only does it put it on screen for you, but it it fully live updates, so you can watch as the CS goes and as the counters tick up in gold and all of that. But also, what I really loved, especially for people who can have something up on their screen while they work, but not necessarily have like a video or audio playing, you can break out just the stats, and it puts it as a thin little column, and you can just leave that up on your other screen and see as kills come in, as objectives get taken. If Azir is in the game, you're screwed, because I noticed this week that Azir passive towers, when that gets killed, it gets counted as a tower kill for the team.
Yeah,
So
that doesn't carry over to
potentially
fantasy, though.
Right.
Which
But
is
you could
great.
potentially have like 100 tower kills in
You
a
could.
single game.
And that's
statistically.
really, really annoying.
Yeah, Tom and I had fun casting that, if I remember correctly. That was interesting.
Yeah, we found that
11
out.
towers to 3.
We found that during the Omen GG tournament when one team had like 15 towers and lost the game to a team with 7.
Yep. But love the feature. Absolutely love the feature. Like I said, I didn't really hear anything about it. I thought this was new just to this season, but I guess we've had it since Worlds. So poo on me. I'm a bad host.
It's Worlds. Fuck, can we do that again?
What?
Whoosh.
Yeah, that did just go right over my head.
Golf
Speaking of
Golf
things
clap.
going over my head, what didn't go over my head this week was also seeing the new Dragon emblem. Mitch is here. I have free reign. I can do whatever I want for transitions. We'll just keep going.
Why is Mitch the taskmaster? Why are you like, oh, Mitch isn't here, guys. I'm going to take it down a notch.
He's the one that every single time there's a transition groans audibly.
Yeah, he's the only one who gets disappointed, at least audibly or visually.
Every
The rest of
time,
you just
too.
sit there silently.
Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. He's just like, transitions.
How dare we swap topics?
But yeah, there was the new Dragon albums that show how many out of the 5 Dragon stacks there are. And what was with the 60 frame streaming now? That looks terrible and confusing.
I guess it's just a test stream, because they had the Riot Games 2 stream, which, if you guys know, for like LPL, Oceania, and the OGN leagues, they put the simultaneous broadcasts on, depending on the region you want to watch. But I guess since they have that one, they're like, hey, people have been requesting 60 FPS stream. Why don't we just do it and see how it goes?
Nope, take it away. Didn't like it. Didn't like it at all.
That's the best part.
too
You can just
fast.
watch
I
the
didn't even
normal
know
one.
it existed. I didn't even know it existed. I won't lie.
Well, unfortunately, for whatever reason, when I loaded up, I watched a lot of the LCS today on my Xbox, and when I loaded that up, it actually defaulted to the 60 frame stream. So I had to go down and I had to take it from source to high quality, and it made it like just a little shitty. And I was like, well, I guess I might as well watch it on 60 frames. But I didn't appreciate that. I don't know who would ask for that ever.
Right.
Because it's not how you actually play the game. Like, you never see the game in that speed. So I don't know why you would want to watch somebody else play it like that.
I don't know. A lot of people have
I don't think they anticipate people investing in Xboxes. So probably just didn't take that one into
I
account.
don't know. I think
Well,
a
you can
large...
watch it on PC like that, too.
I was going to say a large majority of people, when they play the game, actually probably lock their stuff at 60 FPS. So maybe they're just like, hey, I played the game at this speed, so maybe I want to watch the game at this speed. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't turn it on. I didn't care.
What I experienced wasn't anything I've ever seen in game, and I have a pretty good computer. So I don't know. Either way, it's a moot point.
It's a mot point.
It's a mod point. Lots of mod points this week. So you guys have been asking for it quite a bit, and we're going to give it to you. We are going to try to touch upon the Korean and Chinese scenes, as well as any other regional activity that's going on outside of the NA and EU. We won't go into it as deep as we do the NA and the EU, because that's kind of the direction the show is, but we do want to give it a little bit of attention. So, OT, you watched quite a bit of those games this week. What do we got?
Let's start in Korea, because that's who's probably going to win Worlds again anyway. So,
Even though they shipped out all their talent to China?
yeah, well, we could say they shipped their talent out to China. Most of us like to say that they sent all their talent on an extended vacation. Anyway, so OGN has been a little bit interesting because, like you mentioned, with all of the talent kind of being sort of brand new and a lot of the older talent moving off to the LPL and playing in Chinese leagues or the LSPL, whatever their challenger league is, there's not a lot of very, big names left. Obviously, you still have Faker. We still have a lot of the old Najin players. There's still some KT players floating around. And then there's the GE Tigers, which is basically Najin older school team. So anyway, there's a lot of players still floating around in Korea, but it's making for some very interesting things. Like, first off, in the standings, SK Telecom is not in first, which is kind of mind-blowing because not a lot of people would have expect that. You think all the talent's kind of been taken away, that the team that has all the talent should be in first place. Actually, the GE Tigers, that team that has a lot of the old veteran talent that maybe not be superstar status but are decently known players in Korea, are doing pretty well. And of course, with a lot of the talent being taken away, some of the talent that wants to stick around has had to do a bit of role swapping. So we see former CJ Blaze mid laner Ambition in the jungle, and he's not doing all too poorly because CJ's actually tied with SK Telecom in the standings. So if you guys...
And to be fair, so here's the thing to consider is that this is CJ's, in CJ's first rotation, they played all of the good teams. They played SKT, they played Najin, they played GE, which were the top teams coming into this. They beat SKT and Najin pretty handily. Really clean victory. CJ played out of their minds. Ambition did work in the jungle, and Ambition used to suck. I hate Ambition, frankly. He used to feed First Blood and just be awful when he played mid lane, but he's actually a really solid jungler. I think the limited champion pool in the jungle is letting him focus on a very small amount of things, and it's doing really well for him. And I also think that, their schedule is only going to get easier, too, so they may keep going up in the standings.
I believe every team plays each other... Is it just once or is it twice?
Twice.
I think it's twice, yeah.
It's twice.
So we'll have to see how they do, because that means that they've played the hardest teams at the start of the season. They're going to have to play the hardest teams at the end of the season, too. So we'll have to see. Keep an eye on CJ. But yeah, this week alone, there were some pretty interesting matches. CJ versus KT was a pretty big one. CJ actually, spoiler alert, because that's what we're going to be doing at this podcast, is CJ actually took that one in a 3-game series. They were kind of I wouldn't say they were back and forth games. It was really just each game was very one-sided, I guess is the best way to put it. It was, KT would have one game and then all of a sudden the next game was completely CJ's. And it was a kind of interesting series to watch just from a spectator standpoint, because it was instead of going back and forth and having this long drawn-out game, it was literally all right, this team gets that game, this team gets that game, this team gets that game. And it was very interesting.
Well, so CJ lose. I don't want to. I guess super spoilers. Yeah, CJ loses the first game, pretty much because of poor pick bans and poor positioning. But they come back. I think they should have 2-0'd. Quite honestly, they slipped up in that first game. So I also think that KT's looking really weak. But you're right. It was just CJ just effed up twice in that game and lost completely. And then in the next 2 games, they pretty much just swept KT, no problem. So, yeah, definitely some one-sided games, but definitely interesting to watch, especially since CJ's doing so well.
We had SK Telecom T1 taking on Incredible Miracle and a very much predicted 2-0 in that series. I don't think we really saw anything we didn't want to see from that series.
Support Vigar, and EasyHoon plays Cassiopeia mid in Game 1. So definitely, if you guys are looking for VODs to watch that are fun and are really interesting, watch that one. EasyHoon flashes aggressively. The most boring, most defensive mid laner in the world flashes aggressively. It's a game worth watching. It is totally a stomp, but it's a game worth watching.
He's got to keep up his mid lane league leading 11 KDA. Actually, I think he's not leading the entire league in KDA. Pickaboo technically has that title still, but... I think the whole interesting kind of flip and flop that SKT actually has with the 1-2 punch of Faker and EasyHoon is really interesting, especially because with OGM being best of 3 this time around, rather than being the best of 2 format that a lot of people are accustomed to, being able to swap out players like that in the middle of the series, it's really, really interesting because it affects pick ban phase heavily. Especially you have the coaches in the boots. The coaches have a lot of work to do. Who are they going to use in game number 2? If they did so well in game 1, why are they swapping? Do they have a different strategy? And they really do. Like you said, EasyHoon usually winds up playing the more AP-focused mages that kind of sit in the back lines. They wave clear, they siege. But in this case, they completely caught IM off guard by coming for something along the lines of a Cassiopeia pickup. She still has a ton of wave clear, but it's a lot more of an aggressive pickup. And then they swap Faker into, do Faker things on Assassin E champions.
Yeah, Faker just crushed that game too. Faker just like did what he wanted to do. It wasn't even a challenge for him.
Faker was Faker.
Faker was pretty much Faker. I don't want to take way too much more time on this one. GE Tigers 2-ed CG. CJ, we said that we didn't expect, a lot from either one of these teams. It was kind of like a top of the standings thing at this point because both teams were undefeated going into this series, and GE Tigers kind of dismantled CJ.
Yeah, and keep in mind that GE Tigers got Gnar for Smeb, their top laner, and Smeb is hands down, and in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinions at this point, the best Gnar player in the world. So a lot of their first loss can be attributed to that. So definitely also a game worth watching if you're a Gnar fan.
Samsung, the new Samsung roster, which shows promise, but unfortunately has not really wrapped things together as a team quite yet. Fell T0 to KT. I don't know if there's anything else super interesting about that series. It was basically, technically got a top thread on Reddit, but that was due to a sign in the audience more than the games.
Yeah. Samsung is like all solo queue players imported onto a team. They're all very talented, but they know nothing about macro strategy. It's kind of like a challenger team suddenly thrown into the LCS. So we might see them get better. They might continue to be bad. Who knows?
I don't know. They still have one of my favorite support players in Korea in the form of Wraith, who was formerly known as Casper, who played on SKT for a little bit, formerly known as Jinair Ice Bear, which is the name he should have kept. But he likes playing...
Greatest name ever.
He played like Volibear support when he was Ice Bear, which is the interesting thing, the really cool thing. But that's the interesting thing about him is he plays these unconventional supports. There were a couple of games, if you watch back, I believe it was in week 1, he played support Syndra and was pretty much the single reason why Samsung won a game that they should have lost because of his clutch stuns using that Scatter the Weak. It was very, very interesting. But aside from my love of Wraith, forever known as Ice Bear in my heart, Jinair actually 2-0 Najin, which is something I wasn't really expecting. Jinair roster, it has Captain Jack, it still has Gank by Mom, it has like a couple solid members of the Korean scene, but Najin is still pretty much Najin. Like, Najin was one of the strongest teams after people left because not a lot of their own players left.
And I think Jinair, a lot of their win can be credited to Chaser, their jungler. They played very... interesting picks in game 1. Like, they had a very interesting strategy. Game 2 was very much like a standard meta set of picks, and they kind of just outmaneuvered Najin in a lot of cases. Also, their mid laner GBM played an amazing Lissandra game, ended up building almost full damage, Death Cap, Hourglass, DFG, Void Staff, like, just killed everybody in these team fights. Like, really brought out a lot of damage in these games. The game 2 especially, I think, was really interesting.
Yeah, if you guys don't have a chance to watch OGN, there's no excuse not to anymore because the VODs are free on the Riot Games channel. So you can just head over there and scoot on over and watch the OGN games whenever you want to, not just in the early hours of the morning or maybe the early hours of the evening, depending on where you are in the world. But yeah, things are shaping up to be pretty interesting. You have your top teams, you have your bottom teams over there, but the top teams weren't exactly who we expected. So OGN looking to be pretty cool stuff.
Let's do like a 5-minute China rundown because China's big and convoluted and complicated, and we already spent like 20 minutes on OGN.
all the Koreans are doing really, really bad, and all of the Chinese players are struggling to keep up with them if you're not on OMG. Okay, China's done.
Oh my god! I was gonna say a little more than that. Anyway, Snake doing really well. Snake is a team that used to suck, and they're doing really well. Probably just doing well. Kind of a fluke. They beat EDG. That's not too exciting. EDG, remember, has Pawn and Deft. So normally a team that does really well didn't show up this week. OMG at the top of the standings. No one's surprised. Dade's team is also commonly referred to as the Dade Retirement Home Masters 3 because Dade literally does nothing in 90% of the games, and then 1 in 10 of those games shows up and carries. And that's pretty much all I know about China. So
yeah, like some of the teams in China that you expect to do like really, really well because they brought in these Korean players are doing not so great. Like World Elite wound up bringing in Spirit from Samsung, and they are currently 0-4. I don't believe they've taken a game off of anybody quite yet. Vici Gaming, which we mentioned just briefly, not necessarily living up to the potential whatsoever. They're kind of cruising on easy street for this point in time. Invictus Gaming doing fairly well. That's probably the tryhard team because they have Kakao and Rookie, that combination. Those players coming over from KT, they've basically gone over and haven't really skipped a beat. I mean, there was some little bit of talks in the off season about how they might have gotten screwed out of a team and how there were some contract issues with those two players. So they might actually have a fire lit under their asses where the rest of the players may not. Edward Gaming seems to just be kind of coasting through. Like you said, they lost to Snake. They just probably didn't show up in that game. But otherwise, they've been doing pretty solid just based off pure star power. They're 3-1 or 3-0-1 if you want to look at the standings that way. OMG, basically the full Chinese hope basically the same OMG roster we saw at Worlds, although they have a new support, it looks like, starting, and they have Uzi coming over from Royal Club, so still pretty solid, all in all. Not all too much really interesting about LPL. I unfortunately don't get a chance to watch a lot of LPL just based on when the games actually are. And so I try to watch as much as I can in my off time, but it's just a really difficult region for me to catch. Usually I prioritize OGN over it just because I find it more interesting, to be completely honest.
I'd say LPL is incredibly interesting this year. Riot is now, of course, doing that English broadcast, which you can catch at least some of the games. They play an absurd amount of games on a daily basis, though, so Riot can't actually cover all of them, to my knowledge. So I'd say watch what you can. We'll let you guys know every week if there's any particularly exciting games you should watch, maybe some controversial picks. But I think this week was pretty tame. Some unexpected results, definitely, but I think a lot more to do with teams kind of not being comfortable and not figuring out how they want to play these new teams as opposed to like really high quality games.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of 2-0s, like they're doing the old OGN format of a best of 2 for every single time they play. So a lot of 2-0s, maybe 1 or 2 1-1s between some of the teams that might not necessarily be top of the table anyway. So yeah, that's pretty much LPL right there. There's nothing really to highlight as far as like games go, at least not that I was able to watch.
Boom. All right. Well, let's slide over to the EU LCS, and we'll start right at the beginning. Week 1, day 1, game 1. The showstopper, the highlighted game. Elements versus Fnatic.
Oh, man. Elements against Fnatic. It's a rematch of the finals of the summer playoffs in Europe. We have Elements, the European super team. They've picked up Reckless. They've thrown Tabs off to the wayside. They scattered him away. Froggen is leading the helm of what seems to be the most powerful team in Europe right now. Sure, they had a disappointing performance at IEM San Jose, but that was just merely a fluke. They went over there and they practiced in NA for 2 weeks straight. They barely prepared for that tournament whatsoever. So they cast that one off, and they're going up against a Fnatic lineup that honestly nobody knew a lot about. Febevin was taken from H2K, not technically poached, taken from H2K. He decides to join Fnatic. And he's in this lineup with Yellowstar as the elder member. He is like the leader and seen as, you know, the player that really needs to hold this team together. They pick up 2 Korean players, Rainover, former incredible Miracle jungler, and they pick up Huni, this unknown top lane prodigy that was never old enough to play in OGN, but now he's here in EU and suddenly he's old enough to play. Maybe that's how birthdays work. I don't really know. And then they have Steelback, who's this French challenger European AD carry, who is in this bottom lane now with Yellowstar, who's one of the better supports in the European LCS. So everybody goes into this one with high expectations for Elements. The pick and ban phase goes through. There's a Rengar in the jungle. You know, there's not a lot of tanky frontline for Fnatic. So you're thinking that on the side of Elements, all they have to really do is, you know, do their thing. They go towards the later stages of the game. They're going to have a superior team composition. Wicked gets his Aurelia. There's Froggen with a Lulu in the mid lane, so he can provide utility for Reckless, who's, you know, the big hyped up AD carry. So we get into the game, and what winds up happening is bottom lane seems to be going pretty decisively in favor of Elements. You know, we have Nif and Reckless going up against Yellowstar and Steelback. So not necessarily a lot that is expected out of Steelback at this point in time, especially against, you know, the best AD carry in Europe. There's not a lot that really happens, but like Reckless is kind of winning the lane phase. Up in the top side of the map, however, Huni and Rainover are able to turn like a gank around, and they wind up punishing Wicked's Aurelia, which, you know, a lot of people are like, hey, you know, this is Wicked's best champion. He's going to do fine in this lane phase. They punish him with a gank. All right, that winds up happening. There's like a counter gank that comes up a couple minutes later from Shook, and they punish that one again. All of a sudden, Wicked's Aurelia is very, very far behind. And because of all this pressure on the top side of the map, Yellowstar is kind of able to leave bottom lane and then starts coming into mid lane, starts pressuring around Dragon Pit. And before you know it, Febevin Xerath is like 6-0. Huni in the top lane is like 4-0. And Fnatic just crushed Elements. Elements had no early game traction. Wicked, I think the best part was like the good illustration of what Elements was trying to do in this game was they had all this utility. They had a Wicked and then they had a Reckless, and it was like their job to carry the game. But like 20 minutes into the game, Elements is trying to take the outer mid tower. They wind up using all their shields. They wind up blowing heals. They use the wild growth on Wicked's Aurelia, who at this point is like 1-7. And Fnatic just chain CCs him, drops him under the tower, like there's nothing left from Elements, and that was kind of it. Elements' entire game plan was like, we're just going to do the thing where we farm for 20 minutes and then group up and like win the game through a strong objective and side lane control. And Fnatic was like, yeah, we're just going to kill you guys.
We're just going to push Sivir ult, and then we're going to be on top of you in 2 seconds. And fun fact, when, you have 2 damage dealers and one of them is Graves, you don't do any damage unless Aurelia is fed. So get shit on. It was a bad... Like, really, I think good picks from Fnatic. I think if they did not have the decisive shot calling they did, it would have gone south. We've seen very similar team comps this whole weekend from both regions go south quickly, like when you don't have those decisive engages. But clearly, Yellow Star was calling the shots, making the engages happen, and like Rainover, who's a player who, quite frankly, used to be really bad, played out of his mind in these games and did really well.
His Rengar was like surprisingly good. Nobody really expected him to do that. Like looking at his past couple of games in the past couple of patches, he was a very AP centric jungler. Like he had maybe his 1 or 2 games as Jarvan and Lee Sin, but then he wound up playing like way back in the day a lot of Evelynn and a lot of Elise, who aren't necessarily good right now. Evelynn pretty much off the radar, and Elise not necessarily a top tier pick at this point in time. Rengar actually wasn't necessarily a top tier pick at this point in time either. You have Rek'Sai being banned in almost every single game in the LCS this week, and when she got through, there were a lot of problems dealing with her. Lee Sin and Jarvan were kind of the top 2 go-to picks. We saw a lot of Olaf for some reason, and like Rengar is just, he just kind of flew under the radar. Nobody necessarily expected to see him. But yeah, I mean, Fnatic in this game, they just came out and they just impressed everybody. They're just like, hey, we have a new roster, but our scouts absolutely knew what they were doing when we were picking this team, and it was just devastating. Also,
this is the first time since Cloud9, by the way, I think we've seen like a roster do so well that's so fresh to the scene.
Challenge. I don't know about that one.
Reference Samsung and Korea. Do it.
I'm thinking like Alternate and MYM, and Alternate had a really strong like summer season 3. MYM fell off after the first week, even though Alternate was 5-0 and MYM was 4-1. I mean, as we get down later, I could tell you another roster that's shocking people.
Okay, all right.
I'd also I have to just note, though, that one of the things that really, I think, makes this team tick is how good Rainover's English is. Like, they did an interview with him and Yellowstar, and Leo was like, we expected there to be a translator, and, like, Rainover just sits there, just like, no, I'm fine, I could do this, let's go.
This really surprised me. I mean, I was expecting Fnatic not to be the worst team in the world, because you do have a really solid foundation with their staff and with Yellowstar.
And Gambit's in the league, so they can't be the worst. It's not possible.
They can't be.
Leave Gambit alone.
But Fevabin blew me away, and I think if you're H2K and you just lost Fevabin to Fnatic, and then you watch him go 10-1-12 against Elements, you're just thinking to yourself like, Jesus Christ. And then let's just segue over to that game. We're going to jump around the schedule here. Fnatic versus H2K, week 1, day 2, game 4.
So this game as a whole was like an absolute mess in picks and bans. First off, like Febivin gets Zed, which is never going to be a good thing. He's obviously an incredibly mechanically gifted player, and like, okay, so my first impression when he gets Zed and like everyone else is like, Ryu's gonna play like a trauma victim, for the love of God. Like, that's the character he got styled on. And Ryu, to be fair, actually played really well in the mid lane. He played very safe. He was farming very well. Did not die at all in lane. But Febivin got to roam, and Febivin's roam had a lot of impact. Got him a couple assists in the early game. Easily transferred it over. Rainover's Olaf pick seemed a little sketchy in the beginning of the game, but actually came in pretty big as they moved later and later into the game in those late game team fights. Huni showed us an amazing Rumble game. Rumble, of course, still an incredibly powerful character. Those ultimates can turn team fights in an instant. And it really, the big thing from H2K was like, I talked earlier about how if you're going to play Sivir in your comp, you need to be really decisive on when you want to engage. Mostly because, like, by nature, the comps that build that are usually weaker in 5v5 team fights. And that's what we saw here. Like, obviously, Fnatic has a very strong 5v5 team fight. But what teams have been consistently doing with Sivir and why it's been going south for them is you don't want 5v5s, you want like 3v3s. You want to find small skirmishes where the team is out of position, where you can force cooldowns, where you can get an advantage. But instead, like, the team fights that they tried to force were like Voidal ulting someone and then Sivir ulting and the whole team running in is 5. And that's just not going to work because you're not going to outdamage a Rumble who is this far ahead. You're not going to outdamage like an Olaf who just gets to like, okay, bring your backline to me. Why not? Like, deal. So it was just it was a sloppy game from H2K, and like after the first few kills, it was just looked like Fnatic styling on them. Like it looked effortless for them.
So one of the things that did happen, I believe there was a failed gank in top lane to kind of start things off where Odwamne wound up picking up a kill on Reignover, who dove a little bit too deep. And then I think there was like a missed teleport use from Odwamne at one point too that just completely like, they just kind of like passed the lead that they were given to by Fnatic back over. And then after you wind up doing that, like you had a leading matchup on Aurelia against Rumble, which is going to be very, very beneficial for the Aurelia player. But then you wind up throwing it away, and like by mismanaging your teleports, Rumble just goes from being like the 0-1 down in lane champion to, oh hey, you guys have a sloppy team fight because you're trying to run at us. Now you have to run over the equalizer, you have to run through an Olaf, you have to run past an Annie Tibber stun. Like you're not going to wind up getting all of that, and it just really fell apart. Another thing I really want to highlight about H2K is Hjarnan. In their previous matchup, as well as this game, we'll talk about the previous matchup a little bit later where this is a lot more prevalent, but Hjarnan seems to have Challenger scene Altec syndrome, where he thinks he's a top laner rather than an AD carry, and he kind of moves off to different lanes and starts pushing different lanes when the team kind of needs him to be their damage output. This game, especially with the Sivir ultimates, he was one of those main forms of initiation. Every single time he was not with the team or caught out of position or off on the other side of the map, that completely deflated what the team composition from H2K wanted to do. So I think, like H2K, maybe it's week one jitters. Their pick and ban phase has historically been their weak point. Hopefully having a coach on comms, I thought that was going to be a little bit better. It looks like they had a composition that had some cohesion, but it was kind of sniffed out and countered by what Fnatic was going to do. So maybe with like another week of preparation in the LCS, they'll be able to get stuff together. But H2K did not impress with that Febivin.
Well, and I'm sure what also factored into that was their day 2 game. Their day 1, they also lost to Copenhagen Wolves.
Yeah. That game was... All right, so...
That was a good segue, by the way.
That was actually
give me credit
not
for that.
Terrible.
You guys weren't ready for
so,
that.
I wasn't at all. I was stunned. I was expecting a transition to something completely different.
It's like you were hit by an Annie Tibber.
Listening from home right now, and he's got like a single tear rolling down his eye.
All right. So what I'm going to say about this is, once again, like, picks and bans are really weird. So here's the thing about Sion. Sion is good, has the potential to be fantastic, but he doesn't do damage. He provides CC. He can zone people in team fights. And so if you're going to pick Sion, you need to pick characters who do damage. Kassadin doesn't do damage until very, very late game. Graves only has burst. So when you put those two on a team with Sion, what you have is a team fight where in the first 2 seconds, you blow all of your cooldowns, and then the enemy team goes, oh, okay, cool, yeah, that's nice. And then they kill you. They just murder you. And that's exactly what we saw happen in every single one of these fights.
So I think this game really illustrates the fact that, at least in the EU LCS side of things, week 1 is really like live or die by top lane ganks. Like, a lot of pressure was focused in the top lane, specifically in this game, but it was a trend that I noticed in EU throughout the entire weekend, was top laners are getting a lot of ganks, and that was really dictating the pace of the game, which is something that we really haven't seen before. We've seen, the top lane is the wet noodle fight between 2 tanks, and that's really all that happens. But in these cases, because of the improved usage of teleport that people are starting to utilize for team fights and moving across the map, for the fact that people know that these tanks can dish out a decent amount of damage. We had a Gnar against a Sion in this game, and Gnar deals a lot of damage when he builds straight tank because the champion is balanced. But anyway, Youngbuck...
3 seconds of hard CC at a level 16 team fight that's easy to land with a competent team, and especially with a J4. So yeah, Gnar's pretty powerful.
But Youngbuck was camped mercilessly in this game. He was camped top lane early on and wound up dying to first blood. They timed they actually timed his trinket ward. So the moment that ward was gone, the gank came in for first blood, and he had already used his leap, and the leap has a long cooldown, so there was a lot of stuff that, he couldn't use at that point in time. The repeat gank top lane, and then a third gank top lane wound up trying to take him out of the game entirely. And to be completely honest, H2K's composition, like you said, they had certain power spikes that didn't necessarily coincide with one another, but they had such a ridiculous lead in this game that it boggled my mind how they wound up losing it. And one of the things that they wound up doing was they wound up going into these awkward team fights, which kind of categorizes what Copenhagen Wolves used to do. Copenhagen Wolves last split, they used to go into these big dragon fights when they didn't have key ultimates and they didn't have key cooldowns available to themselves, and they just completely lost out because of it. In this game, H2K wasn't able to put a semblance of that big team fight composition together because they were across the map. We had Yarnan's Graves pushing bot lane when Odwamne was in top lane and trying to ult in the mid lane where something was trying to happen, but there was no focus of DPS at that point in time. And on Copenhagen Wolves side, Soren had Cassiopeia. So Cassiopeia just is literally a ticking time bomb because you wait a couple of minutes into the game, you get 500 stacks, and suddenly with a death cap and a Saracen Brace, she has 1k AP. And she just melts through the team. And we have Cassiopeia and Jarvan and Gnar. The team is just going nowhere, and H2K literally threw this game away.
Take a breath.
I mean, it's going to be tough. I think if
I'm sorry, this game just got me so aggravated because I was like, H2K can win this game. 20 minutes into the game, they're like 5k gold ahead. This should be theirs. And then Copenhagen Wolves had a Draven with 1 kill. He only had 1 chance to cash in his adoration stacks, and they still
the
won.
part about that was he was sitting on like 1,000-something stacks, but had nothing to realistically spend it all on.
He
He was almost full build.
We're already so far ahead, it doesn't matter.
He had QSS to upgrade into Mercurial Scimitar, and that was it. Other than that, and like some consumables, he was done. So they were like, oh, when's it going to cash in? When's it going to cash in? And every fight, he would just not get a kill, not get a kill, not get a kill. But the most ironic thing was, even if he got it, so what?
He was still tied for most gold on his team at 19.6k with the 10, 4, and 5 Cassiopeia.
Crazy.
Take me away from this H2K Copenhagen Wolves game. I'm too upset that H2K threw this lead. I'm happy for the Wolves. Like, I think the Wolves are going to be a bit better than they were last split. Hopefully, like a middle of the pack team. But I mean, there are just glaring weaknesses in both of these teams.
well, the Wolves didn't have a perfect week 1. They did fall to Giants.
I like this. I'm liking your strategy here. This is working out really well. They'll like jump between teams. Ping-ponging
I'm wondering
teams.
if we're going to hit a spot where we can't go any further, though.
Probably.
Let's just keep the energy going.
Let's just keep the ping-pong going.
Go.
All right.
Actually, I think if we follow the chain, we will do it all the way. Oh, I'm looking at this here.
I like it.
So Copenhagen Wolves in this game showed me why I'm a little bit worried for their overall ability to pick champions that do things in League of Legends. So they get the Nargan for Young Buck.
That is a great statement, by the way. Their overall ability to pick champions that do things in League of Legends.
So, all right, so let me run this past you viewers out there in podcast land or in Twitch chat land. So the Giants' composition was Jax in the top lane, Vi in the jungle, Ahri in mid lane, and Graves and Thresh at AD carry and support. Seems like something we've seen a lot of times before. Let's mosey on over to the Copenhagen Wolves composition. Gnar in the top lane, Xerath as their mid laner, Hecarim in the jungle, Kalista and Braum as their AD carry and support. So this looks like to be a different take on the let's run in with the Sivir composition and have the Xerath providing cover fire in the back lines. This is like the let's throw Braum in, knock everybody up, Hecarim rushes in. Yeah, everybody's so cool. We're all running in right there. But the problem is you're looking at this composition, it's kind of like, cool, so what do they do before that fight happens? And the answer is they die a lot top, mid, jungle, bot lane. And they don't really do anything when they're at like a 4 to 5k gold deficit.
Yeah, this is the team where you have to get ahead. It looks like, if you look at it on paper, this team by itself, okay, if this team's even with someone, they're always going to win team fights. They have so much CC, they have great engage options, they have good wave clear to survive, but when they die a bunch in the laning phase and you look at the enemy team, I mean, you've got Graves, you've got Thresh, you've got Ahri, you've got Vi, you've got Jax. So Jax is your late game scaling threat, you've got Ahri for picks, you've got Vi for picks, you've got Thresh for picks. And that's basically what happened. You pick the team apart, you get that gold advantage, and suddenly, base damages just aren't enough. When you have, Gnar alone has good enough base damages to build full tank, but Hecarim does, literally nothing when that far behind.
I mean, Copenhagen Wolves try to go full Unicorns of Love on this composition, but unfortunately dogs and unicorns are not part of the same species, so it didn't really wind up working for them in this game. Although Giants kind of had a very solid gameplay. And I mean, I'm a little bit worried for Giants compositions because they look like an early Millennium where they were doing really great early on. They had these pick compositions, but that's all they had. And so far, their top laner really beat every single time that Jax is left open, which is almost every game because nobody really cares about Jax at this point in time. They pick Jax, and then they camp his lane hard. But they camp his lane by putting the jungler and having Pepinero, the mid laner, roam up there and try to get him kills. Once they get that Jax, that kill advantage, or maybe a tower down, they try to snowball off of that. And if it works, it works. But they haven't done anything else besides that yet. I don't know if it's just, hey, it worked, we're just going to do it again, and we don't have to reveal any of our other strategies. Or if it's like, hey, it worked, good thing, because that's all we can do right now.
I don't know either. I'm impressed that they did as well as they did this week, but overall, I think that, it's looking a lot like they need a hard carry top laner, and that's not exactly where the meta puts it right now. And if they play against a team that has smarter map movement and smarter early game, they're going to lose to a more powerful pick like Gnar or Lissandra in one of these games. I
mean, they had a lot of pick potential, and that kind of kept them in the game. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens when they wind up going against, this week they wound up playing against Copenhagen Wolves, and they played against Meet Your Makers, and Meet Your Makers had like a last-minute substitution where Blizer or Blizzer, whatever his name is, he has 300 afterwards, came in for Corey, who was formerly known as Selfie. So they kind of played, the last place team from last split and a team that all of a sudden all of their practice was thrown out the window at the last second. I mean, they won both of their games, and they looked pretty decent doing it, but like, once they start getting against, the Fanatics and the SKs and maybe Elements if they get their shit together, that's the big test for Giants.
Definitely.
Great transition. With Meet Your Makers, what do we know if Selfie's coming back? Or?
Well, he was out for week number 1, but Meet Your Makers hasn't released any other statements yet.
Okay.
I think he's gone.
So,
that's my
yeah, because that's what I had heard. I heard that this wasn't just like a week 1 thing, that this was maybe more on the permanent side, but I haven't heard anything official.
I don't see anything on their MYM.
We'll get announcements. My understanding was that Blizzard was the tryout, and that Selfie was gone, and not coming back. And so Blizzard was a tryout, and it's not they're not convinced that he should stay. And after this week, I'm not. He didn't play horrible. Didn't play great either, and obviously this team has been a little bit of a mess. We've seen a lot of last-minute mid lane swaps in the region, and I think they definitely suffered because of it.
Yeah, but you can't shoulder the blame on Blizzard for this or Blythe. God, I have no fucking clue what his name is. I want to call him Blizzard, only because then I could imagine he gets hit with a Nerf bat like everything else that happens in Blizzard games. But
ew,
Meet Your Makers
are broken.
Fucking we're going to have Swarm hosts. Don't worry, they'll change in Legacy of the Void. But Meet Your Makers team composition, it looked interesting. But the thing that really shocked me is this is the first time we saw the Olaf jungle picked up by Horo, and it didn't do all too much because the rest of his lane just got behind. Interestingly enough, Ralz and Nisbeth, the bottom lane, I thought were going to be pretty solid and reliable. Thanks a lot, LOL Esports Fantasy Points. But Ralz died early on to Adrian Rydell. Got hit with a hook and just died straight up in lane. And then Mimer in the top lane played Renekton, which was the one champion he played. I believe it was spring 2014. He played it the most, and yeah, it's changed a little bit, but I think it's actually a little bit better now to be a Renekton with those changes. He just straight up fed, and we already talked about what happens when Giants wind up getting a Jackson top lane to get ahead. Their strategy is, hey, we have a fed Jax, 4-1-5 Worldy B, yay, we win the game. Mimer was 0-5-0, and this game was 27 minutes long. I don't know. MIM just literally got destroyed. Yeah.
And I mean, but MYM did fare a little bit better in their other game versus SK. I mean, despite the fact that SK did end up pretty much crushing them, Fox in the mid lane now for SK, just doing a ton of work. We did see that team as a whole, really didn't have the decisiveness that they needed to pull ahead. And, just a rough week for them overall. But really, they just looked sloppy, especially in this second game.
So this second game was really, really cool to me because there was a post that was on the Trinity Force Podcast Network subreddit. In case you guys don't know, reddit.com/r/tforce network. There was a post that was a live update thread about this game. And one of the things was so the gist of this game is MIM had a kill lead for a decent majority of this game. Like, SK came out of the gate swinging, they had the early game advantage, and they wound up taking a couple of dragons. Like, I believe they took, like, the first 2 or 3 dragons completely uncontested. MYM, they were getting pushed back, they were getting beat down, but in the mid-game, they started turning things around. Mimer had Gnar, they had the ability to use that top laner to get in position for some good fights. Blizzard on Ahri was able to land some of his skill shots in this game where he was a little bit more nervous last time. Hora was on Lee Sin, he was able to help pick people out of position and do things in fights a lot better than his Olaf pick was able to do. But the big story of this game, and the big illustrated point, is you can win these fights and you can have a strong comeback, but if you don't put the investment into map control and you don't put the investment into securing objectives, you straight up lose the game. 2 things for SK really kept them into this one. One was Forgiven on Graves being able to CS like a beast, be in all the lanes he possibly could. When MYM was trying to push a lane and get an inner tower, Graves was there using his ultimate and using his abilities. That burst damage doesn't do a lot in the later stages of the game, using it to just obliterate CS. He has 392 CS in a 37.5-minute game, so he's well above that 10 CS per minute mark. The other thing was complete solid objective control. SK knew that all they had to do in this game was live until they get 5 dragons, because even though the gold counts were getting closer and closer to even, SK literally got that 5th dragon, won that fight, and immediately within 30 seconds the game was over.
And I think that's the power not only of the 5th dragon buff, but also just SK knowing when they can just end a game. And I think that's going to be one of their big strengths, because what we saw a lot in these games was teams not really knowing how to end. We saw it in NA and EU, was that they got a small advantage, and a lot of these less experienced teams just kind of didn't do anything with it.
That's pretty much it. Like, I really got to give props to Forgiven this entire weekend. Forgiven, he couldn't play last split because of a contractual obligation with Copenhagen Wolves. I believe the Copenhagen Wolves contract said he couldn't sign with the team until the summer split was over. So he had a complete season off of LCS, and now he comes back into this SK Gaming team, and he looks really, really solid. That MYM game was a great performance, but the game they played earlier against Roccat was just, he was even better in this one. First off, he picked Lucian, which we haven't seen a lot of Lucian recently, but he was probably the most aggressive Lucian I've seen in forever. He was Eing forward and using his passive ridiculously aggressive, 426 CS in a 39-minute game. Once again, it's like a 10.9 CS per minute mark. Absolutely insane. He was able to help turn these fights around. What?
5-0-7.
Yeah, 5-0-7 on Lucian. Extremely solid. And SK as a team in this game was very, very, very good. Freddy and Svenskeren had their synergy together. Freddy was able to bait out fights from Jankos and Overpow, which, I'm sorry, Overpow in the top lane was not very impressive in his opening debut here in the LCS at least. Freddy's Gnar was able to bait some things around where there were 2-for-1 kills. It should have been a dead Freddy, and that was basically all she wrote. So SK is looking just like a very, very solid team, easily one of the teams to beat in Europe at this point.
Yeah, Rocket, on the other hand, is looking pretty sketchy, though. Definitely not the strength we were promised when it was Overpow to the top lane. I know you love Overpow, but I think you're right that he's kind of bad.
Well, this was a poor performance from Overpow. He played Lissandra that, he wanted to farm. Lissandra against Gnar, the matchup goes whatever way you want it to. I kind of give it to Lissandra early, but Gnar, it's level 6, and Lissandra kind of tombs herself and hopes she doesn't die. But, with the added jungle pressure from Svenskeren, definitely Freddy was in a very advantageous position in that matchup. But Jankos on Lee Sin, he was trying to move around the map and trying to do stuff, but they focused so much on Nuke Duck in the mid lane, which is where I think Roccat is kind of going wrong with this one. So, Nuke Duck comes in, love him or hate him, he's a pretty decent EU LCS mid laner, but he was just surprisingly subpar all weekend. So his LeBlanc was 0-2-1 in this game. And I want to say that Overpow and Jankos both came down to gank his lane 2 to 3 times together, and Fox just shifted away on Kassadin. And they didn't get anything out of it. And after all this failed attempts at ganks, he builds a Medjai's. So he gets his Medjai's and never picks up a kill and only picks up 1 assist because he's never there for a fight and he doesn't have anything to contribute to it because he fell so far behind in this LeBlanc versus Kassadin matchup when he was being camped. His team was camping for him. He wasn't being shut down. He was just had all the help in the world and he didn't do anything with it. Meanwhile, they have Woolite in the bottom lane. He was 1-3-0 on Tristana. Tristana was one of his top played champions when he was playing for the Copenhagen Wolves. And guess what? Any game Copenhagen Wolves won last split was because of Woolite. So why are you not camping for this AD carry that can clearly carry your team and camping for Nuke Duck, who was very lackluster in these games?
Man,
So,
I'm
yeah,
just
okay.
why'd they take
also-
Duck over Ryu? Whatever. But
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
But-
not a huge Nuke Duck fan. I was very pleased with how the new SK is working out, though. I had very high hopes that... Because, SK, I mean, aside from Sven Skaren's behavioral... how do we want to phrase this?
Racism.
Yes. His
Very
racist-based behavioral issues.
Very light, unintentional, I'm sure, racism, but racism nonetheless.
Yeah.
social intolerance was, I believe, how Riot phrased it.
It was racism, but it wasn't that racist. Come on.
Anytime you have to stay at, like, it was racist, but it wasn't that racist.
Right.
It's like,
We'll put it this way.
obviously fucked up, right?
The Patriots didn't deflate the balls that much.
Right.
That got us.
So I feel like he's hopefully learned his lesson, and this time around, when it comes to Europe, he won't be as tempted to make racial slurs for obvious reasons, and maybe they'll actually have a shot at Worlds if they get there. But in terms of getting there, I think they're looking pretty good. Woolite is fitting in very well. The new mid laner is working out. Svenskeren still Svenskeren, and Freddy is steady, as in steadily pushing the lane down and winning the game for them.
But okay, I mean, so Roccat manages, wow, totally off there.
Wow.
SK manages to take down Roccat. Roccat loses to Gambit. So what can we learn from those games?
Roccat did not lose to Gambit. Roccat beat
Roccat
Gambit.
beat Gambit, rather.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't
What
think...
we can learn from those two
There's-
games is that Gambit is still the worst team in the LCS.
Oh, leave
There's the
Gambit
transition.
alone.
Ah!
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Gambit looking pretty bad. Okay, I don't think Pinoy's that good. Despite doing well in this game, like, I'm never impressed with Pinoy. He did really well in this game. He's probably the best player on Gambit. NIQ really didn't show up in either of these games, either this one or the one they played against Unicorns of Love, which really surprised me because on the older version of Gambit, the like half Gambit, half new Gambit roster from last season, he was like the best player by far. Like definitely carried a lot of the games, always gave a good performance in mid lane. But this season he feels a lot weaker, and maybe that's just because the competition has stepped up.
He keeps hovering Teemo and never picks it, so Nick Q can go fuck himself.
Well,
He's
My
not high.
poor boy.
He's not Reggie.
Pick that Teemo.
One of the things about Nick in this split is just judging by his performance in this week and judging his performance at IEM, he's expanded his champion pool by a lot. Last season, it may have just been the meta picks, but he was picking very utility-based mid laners, never once picked an assassin-type champion. Recently, he's been playing, he's picked up Syndra, who is more of a burst mage. She has a stun, not necessarily the same as like an Orianna or a Lulu in the utility department, though. But he played Fizz this week. He played a lot of LeBlanc at IEM. He's played like almost every single champion you could think of. Twice on Syndra, I think, was the only repeat. But he's expanded his champion pool. But by doing so, like, he seems, like you said, to have lost some of that consistency. And it falls back on the other members of Gambit. But the problem is Gambit is consistently an inconsistent team. You have Diamond Prox, who can go, like whatever he did on Sejuani, and then go 0-5-0 on Lee Sin, like the champion that you think of when you think of Diamond Prox. He goes 0-5-0 on it in a game. And in this game against Roccat, it was kind of a typical EU game, because both of these teams, when they played, they had already lost their first game of the opening week of EU LCS. Roccat lost very handily to SK. Gambit wound up losing their matchup decently to Unicorns of Love as well. So they both came into this and they both played very afraid of each other. So there were points in time, but this game was, I think it was the longest one of the weekend. It was about 45 minutes long. Probably don't want to watch it because not a lot of stuff happens in this one, but the teams just played so safe. Like, Rockat's play style last split was, they play slow, they play steady, like, the thing that they kept falling into was slow and steady and eventually losing the game. Whereas Gambit, they were like explosive and in your face, and if they didn't, they lost the game. So both of these teams kind of fell into
Which
like
they
this.
Usually didn't.
Yeah, exactly. But they wound up falling into this like lull where it was just kind of like eventually like Rocket's composition was just like, hey, we have Xerath and Azir, and it's 40 minutes, and you're dead.
All right. Well, I think Dan's going to be bursting at the seams here to talk about Unicorns of Love. So let's talk about Gambit's second game where they went up against. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. Their first game in the week. Their first game.
The jumping around thing is messing with us. All right.
Right.
Unicorns of Love shit on Gambit. They picked a better team and they won. They were better players. They won all of their lanes. Kabachard looked promising in the top lane with that Cassiopeia pick and then didn't really push any kind of advantage. So as a result, Gnar, of course, Vivaciachi, not playing Poppy this game, making Optimus Tom very happy.
So happy.
Gnar ults are broken, and when you combine them with a Jarvan, they're even better. Power of Evil gets Syndra, the champion he's best at. Oh my god. Really? No. We just gotta throw it in every time? Alright.
Yes.
Power of Evil, legendary. I love Power of Evil. This is the performance I expected from him coming in here. Obviously just dominated mid lane. Their bot lane, honestly one of the weakest bot lanes in EU, I would say. Just crushed Benoit and Edward. So overall, like really strong first game performance from Unicorns of Love. Definitely loved the team play. Unfortunately, it was like such a crushing victory that it didn't really showcase anything about either team.
Another interesting thing to note was that the Unicorns of Love drew a Hecarim ban.
They did. The Hecarim was banned out in this game, which is very interesting. But then again, Gambit drew out a Sejuani ban.
True.
This
that
made me really,
oh man.
This made me really nervous because I was looking at Unicorns of Love and thinking like, oh shit, are they really more than just the hype? Like, am I going to have to eat my words on this?
When they pick good champions, they are.
Yeah, but
i.e. their
then they went
game.
again. Then they went up against Elements, and this made me really nervous because if Elements lost to Unicorns of Love, all I would be hearing is Unicorns of Love hype, and then Elements sucking hype.
Yeah, and then we would have heard how much better
won.
Cloud9 is than Elements.
Not to NA yet.
Well, Elements are clearly they're basically the European All-Stars, especially with Reckless in the carry position. Now, I still feel like Nif is sort of a drag on that team. He doesn't have excellent vision control, and he doesn't really make big plays.
I'm going to say it right now. Wicked is not good. Wicked is a mediocre top laner who does not play anything other than Aurelia well. And Aurelia
Wicked is average in the top lane. But that's all they really need in this team comp. If I had to choose between the two of them as to which to replace first, I would replace Nif over Wicked.
I'd replace Wicked in a heartbeat, but that's fair.
Why don't we digress from who's a bad player and talk about how Elements had the pride of EU, Aatrox in the jungle?
They could have picked Poppy in the jungle for all I care. They're gonna beat this horrible team comp from Unicorns of Love.
Hammer diplomacy.
I'm gonna let it run this time.
Yes.
Let it run, Mott. Let it run. No. Yeah, you can't, so here's the thing about, I don't have a problem with their double AP comp, but you can't pick Orianna and Azir on the same team. Both of those champions don't do anything for the first 20 minutes as far as damage and team fights goes. Obviously, they both have utility, but surprise, surprise, anytime they tried to contest any objective at all, they all died. Just instantly. Maybe give power, Syndra. That champion was open. You were legendary on it yesterday. Maybe it'll help you win lane. And it's just unfathomable to me that they would pick such an awful comp. But overall,
decisions there.
Yeah, it was yesterday they picked such a strong comp. They picked it so well, they played it well, and today or in that day it was just crap, just total crap.
Normally when Unicorns of Love picks team, the team comp's either very good. If they do have some weird off meta pick, it's very well thought out and it sort of fits with everything else. This comp, I had a hard time figuring out exactly what they were going for. I would have loved to have heard them in a bit more detail about what exactly they were trying to accomplish with that combination, because it doesn't seem to synergize very well.
Well, the thing about the comp that's nice is that Azir provides so much late game damage, and so does Orianna, between her, in addition to her utility, that if you make it to 30 minutes and you're even on gold or a little bit behind, you'll just start winning every single team fight. But when you're 5 to 10k gold behind at 30 minutes, it doesn't really matter. None of your characters do enough. Vivasace, I think, misitemized here, like went for the death cap instead of the hourglass when he just really needed to survive in a lot of these situations. And of course, like Froggen and Reckless played out of their minds. Like just both of them played phenomenally, and we're just able to shut down every single one of them.
I feel like Unicorns of Love decided, hey, we have the Jarvan Orianna combination. Man, we lost out on the Gnar. What else can really shove things against Jarvan's Cataclysm? Oh, Azir can do that. Why don't we just go for this big run at them and shove things down? And then when you realize it and you like apply it in an actual game, you're like, Jarvan goes in with the Cataclysm, Orianna ults after the Sivir speed up is there, and then Azir shoves everybody out of the Cataclysm.
Yeah. That's why they're Unicorns of Love, not Unicorns of Logic.
Unicorns of Counter Logic Gaming. Segue.
Love conquers all, so I still think we're going to see the Unicorns do very well.
I think they'll do very well, too. I think that was a slip-up. That was a bad pick ban phase.
I think it was just they won. I think it was a bad pick and ban phase, and they just played against a team that should be better than them, and they lost.
Yep.
So, speaking of North America, as we almost had a flawless segue there, day one has some really big upset games. So game one, obviously TSM versus Cloud9.
Oh,
that's my new favorite soundbite.
Let me demonstrate hammer diplomacy.
No!
So let me ask you guys a question. If I told you, without you knowing any other information, that two teams in League of Legends played each other,
there will be peace.
One team placed 103 wards, killed 42 wards from their enemies, took a Baron and 3 dragons, while the other team, interestingly enough, placed the exact same amount of wards at 103, only managed to kill 37 and only got 1 dragon. Who would you say out of the two teams won that?
TSM.
Wait.
Hold
on.
I know what you're trying to go for, but it's so flawed because it's like, let's say that this guy just placed wards in the fountain for 5 minutes to get that ward number up while his base was pushed in, and then the rest of his team just took objectives. It's just like there's situations where that just would not apply at all.
Let me just put it this way.
I don't know what is going on with Cloud9, but like they are doing excellent in lane. They're farming like crazy. They're still doing their traditional trade objective style. If they happen to lose a fight somewhere, the enemy takes an objective, they'll rotate out and they'll take something else to sort of stay close to parity. But their team fights look abysmal, and I cannot figure it out. They just don't have the coordination that they used to have.
I think I know exactly what's happening, and it's the fact that Hai is getting destroyed in lane, and therefore it's affecting their late game team fight calls because he can't do what he thinks he can do in these fights anymore. So one of the things I dislike about Cloud9 in the pick ban phase this week is, first off, game number 1, Hai plays Fizz. I don't think I've seen Hai play a lot of Fizz competitively ever. Game number 2, Hai picks Orianna, the champion that everybody says Hai can't play, and that's why he plays Zed and other stuff. I was not impressed with what Hai could do this week. I know he has the stuff in him. I know he's a solid player, and he did well at IEM, and he did well when they were training in Korea, and he did okay at Worlds. I just kind of feel like Cloud9 went into IEM, prepared for IEM, won IEM, and then was like, hey man, we could just stream and make a lot of money off of streaming. Like, it looked like Cloud9 had like, okay, this is what we're going to do with our composition. And we know what we need to do to stay in a game. We take objectives, we could do this, we have good map movements, etc., etc. But then when it got to like the fights, it was just kind of like, Sneaky, win this for us. And he couldn't.
They didn't really try to fight TSM on the one proven method to beat TSM, which is just kill Bjergsen. If you can just kill Bjergsen a whole bunch, Bjergsen goes on tilt and you lose. But Bjergsen went 8-0-8.
They also
look like old Bjergsen.
They also let Rek'Sai through in the pick and ban phase, which I thought was very, very weird because I figured Cloud9 would know the power of Rek'Sai, but they banned out Tristana, interestingly enough, the LeBlanc, and Nidalee, when historically Dyrus never plays Nidalee, and I'm not exactly sure the power level of Nidalee in the mid lane pick for Bjergsen in a competitive setting.
I believe his Nidalee is pretty good, but I mean the Rek'Sai didn't turn this match. Okay,
Yeah, I definitely.
So this was not a pick, unlike some of the other games we've been discussing. This was not a pick ban loss. This was an execution loss.
I was really disappointed by Meteos. Like, he just wasn't there at all in this first game against TSM.
Elisa's bad. Why are people like?
But it is a comfort pick for him. He knows he's comfortable playing it.
It's not good though. Like,
but
I don't care how comfortable you are with the champion. Like, there is a limit to what it can do, and I think that
this was an execution flaw, because when did you even see Meteos step into lane for the first half?
That's
of the
the
game?
thing. I feel like Elise needed to farm too much in this game to be relevant, which is why she is not necessarily the best pick in this circumstance, especially when Jarvan is available and Lee Sin is available, and you already have the Gnar. Like, Narvin, quote-unquote, has been basically on the winning end of multiple games so far in this first week, when that is left completely untouched to you, and you have this composition that wants to run at people with Sivir. You have the ability to pick people off with Thresh. You have this run forward. Even the Fizz becomes more deadly when everybody's trapped against a wall or in a cataclysm, because the Fish and the Playful Trickster hit so many more people. And if you're going for team fights, why are you not picking that? The Elise is great at picks. Her and Thresh put together, I think, could really pick people apart. Maybe it was something they picked, maybe just to have some hard CC to try to gank Bjergsen in the mid lane. I don't know what their thought process was behind it, but it just did not come to fruition in this game.
If only there was a way to trap a Jinx and a Janna in a pit that they couldn't escape from because they are both totally immobile. If only there was a champion that did that.
I don't know. I still think the Elise could have basically worked out if they just used it at all. I mean, for the early game, they had awesome vision. That's the one thing that Meteos was able to achieve well, is they did have really good ward placement. They were getting all of the stupid little crabs. So they knew everything that was going on. Dyrus was down like 2 to 3 levels for the longest time. And if anything can be said about TSM's second game, if you can at least now put a really strong thumb on Dyrus, you might be able to beat the team just completely. But I don't know, like the point I was trying to make with the whole objective thing was that Cloud9 had superior vision throughout most of the game. They definitely had objective control going a lot better, but they just lost every single team fight. It was terrible.
Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. And like, Cloud9 just did not look on point this weekend. Even when they wound up going into their second game against Gravity, like, they wound up getting some power picks, but the problem is their composition was kind of all over the place. Like, they wound up picking the Rek'Sai this game, so they didn't leave that one open. Meteos got his hands on that one, but their composition just looked to be very strange. Like, they picked sneaky Kog'Maw, and we saw Kog'Maw work for other teams this week in a very protect the Kog'Maw-centric setting. But this composition, they had the Janna. Okay, that's the support you kind of want, either her or Thresh, when you're playing protect the Kog'Maw. They had Orianna, which was like, okay, you could put the shield down, you could disposition the team, you have the ball delivery system, or the ball on something. But their top laner was Sion, who is very good at not dying, but also very subpar at killing people, at least outside of lane phase.
And Tom, specifically Balls on Sion. Balls, who is their carry top. And Sion...
Balls, who got me barely any fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, Sion is like... He's not a carry top laner. I don't even think he's that great of a pick, generally speaking. But he's definitely not something you want to put a superstar player on.
Okay, so you're thinking about Sion, because I got some beef with Cloud9 this game.
Really quick, I love the Sion pick because of just exactly how he does his level 1, which is go into the jungle, find a minion camp that will kill you, come back up as a zombie, and then get level 2. I think that is the best.
That's what we forgot.
Killing people's fantasy points.
We forgot to... Well, I mean, at that point, all he has to do is get 50 minions and it offsets the death, because the fantasy tracking is a little bit skewed towards a kill and assist factor. Yeah. However... we forgot to mention that was something that happened in China this week. A team used Lee Sin and Sion passive to take a level 1 dragon at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That was pretty cool. Nobody here in NA did it, but they did utilize the passive of Sion to take a camp and then teleport to top lane. But most of the time, people wound up picking like a Gnar or something that did the same thing. Only instead of Gnar dying, he would kill the camp with his W, hit level 2, and then teleport to top lane with a full rage bar. And then Sion was kind of like, crap.
Okay, so Kog'Maw is good, right? Kog'Maw can be good. Kog'Maw does a lot of damage, has decent level 6 power spike with Trinity Force. Is Kog'Maw good against Vi? No. How do you beat that? Well, Janna. Janna's pretty good. How do you beat Janna? Morgana. Well, cool. So, Morgana, Vi get picked, and the first thing that it comes to your mind for, what's a good AD carry against Kassadin, Morgana, Vi, and Corki? Let's pick Kog'Maw.
And predictably, they had Janna, but a lot of the Janna ults were completely ineffective. You had Vi is able to go right through it. You have Zed who's able to disappear and go right through it. Kassadin gets pushed out, just comes right back in. It was just, it was protect the Kog'Maw but without any of the protection. And to be honest, against that team comp, it was not a viable thing to do. And then on the other hand, they had no hard engage of their own. So they couldn't lock these assassins down.
The funniest thing is we're harping on the fact that there was no protection for the Kog'Maw, but Kog'Maw didn't die a lot this game. In fact, it was mostly Meteos and Hai that did the dying this game. And he
died all right.
He died 3 times. He had the second least amount of deaths on his team. So
he went 5-3-3 compared to the 0-5-4 for Meteos and the 0-8-7 for Hai.
Yeah, but if you've watched the game, like, they're diving that carry, and whether they're killing him or not, they're making him irrelevant in the rest of the fight, which is basically the same thing.
One of the things that I'm very interested in is Cloud9's composition, in theory, might not be the best team fighting composition, but there's ways to turn a fight around after an enemy team has engaged. There's a lot of turnaround from this composition. They might not have the initiation, but if a team jumps on them, they have the ability to completely turn that fight around, which is what I think they were hoping to do with the Orianna, Kog'Maw, Rek'Sai, the whole package. The only problem is Gravity Gaming, Curse Academy, wound up having a composition with multiple assassins, multiple forms of almost inescapable or inescapable hard CC, and the ability to put a Morgana Black Shield on somebody so they couldn't get locked down by things that Cloud9 wanted to do. So you had Keen on Zed, who would ult in and then shadow out. You had Hansir on Kassadin, who would jump in and then jump out. You had St. Vicious on Vi, who would lock somebody down and then didn't matter because he's Vi and he's tanky and he's there in the back lines all of a sudden. Like, there was the only person that literally could be turned around on was St. Vicious. And it's illustrated here by the fact that St. Vicious died the most because he was in the middle of Cloud9's team, but Cloud9 just couldn't kill any of the damage dealers. They never killed Cop. They only killed Hansir once, and Keen died twice, which wasn't necessarily of his own volition sometimes, but it was just the fact that they got so far behind in mid lane, top lane didn't go the best way they could, and Meteos just had no support on the map for his team this game.
This is a sad week for NA, because I think if you were to say, hey, imagine that Cloud9 is going to do the worst out of any team in North America in the first week, and be the only team that is 0-2, I think you wouldn't even come
challenge. This is a great week for esports because finally Team Liquid's in the LCS and they are 2-0.
You mean Team Liquid sponsored by HTC cell phones?
Oh, hold on a second.
That
Sorry,
was hilarious.
Sorry, my HTC cell phone is ringing.
Oh,
that was so funny. Oh my! I was like, damn. I wonder if it I don't think he planned on it to ring. I think it did ring and he just forgot to silence it. But then he's like, fuck it, and just went for it. Like, I love you, Liquid.
And that is why Liquid now owns half of Team Liquid.
Oh my god, it's so funny. The organization Liquid just got fucked by waiting to get in the league for so long. It'll never stop being funny to me.
Yeah. This isn't the smoothest transition, but let's just hop into Liquid's games.
Actually, it's a very fluid transition, Mott.
I gotta get that on the
Slick.
sideboard. Let's talk about a very interesting game, in my opinion. Team Liquid versus just the tip. Team Impulse.
So this game was pretty interesting. I was expecting Team Liquid to lose this game, to be completely honest. I was rooting for them. I picked them in our pick'em pool, but I was honestly looking for them to lose this game, mainly because Team Liquid comes into this week without Piglet. They were using Keith McBrief, or Liquid Keith, whoever you want to call him, Le Toucan, whatever you want to call him.
But
Let's talk about Keith.
so they come into this game and they pick a Protect the Kog'Maw composition, something that Cloud9 later on in this week would show they don't know what to do with it. But they pick a Protect the Kog'Maw composition and they pick a jungler that is completely supportive. They go for this Nunu pick. So they have Nunu, Lulu, the two champions I confuse the most when they're on the same team, and Janna. And then their carries in this game are Quas in the top lane on Gnar and Keith McBrief on the Kog'Maw. And they're playing against a team composition that is basically team run at you and kill you. Thresh, Sivir, LeBlanc in the mid lane, Jarvan as a jungler, and Aurelia. Notoriously, most of these champions do nasty, nasty things to Kog'Maw. So Liquid goes into this game, and I'm just kind of thinking to myself that this is a composition that Liquid really needs good objective control and really needs to find their team fights appropriately in order to pull off. What winds up happening in this game is Rush, very like his name, rushes headlong into a couple of ganks and winds up giving away some kills to Dominate, to Phoenix, to Keith, and it winds up making this snowball effect where even though Team Impulse was fairly close, if not even in gold with Liquid the entire game, Liquid was able to capitalize on these kills, secure objectives, take dragons, and almost similar to the SK Gaming versus MYM game, even though Impulse was keeping up in kills and being able to get some things done with Rux on Aurelia in the top lane, they just wind up losing out in these dragon fights, and they wind up losing out in these team fights because they protected the Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw died one time in a 40-minute game. They pulled off the composition brilliantly, and a lot of props has to go to Dominate on Nunu, because not only was he a very powerful jungler in the early game with these ganks, but his absolute zeros because the enemy team had Jarvan. They were using the Cataclysm and rushing into this team fight, and Nunu was like, cool, you're all in the same place, and would channel a full channel absolute zero on the enemy team. It was a very well executed composition. I was actually pleasantly surprised by this one.
I'm going to be really sad when Keith goes away in space for Piglet, even though I know Piglet is probably going to be just as good, if not better. But his Caitlyn on CLG got me just so excited. Like, it feels a little dirty saying that because Liquid is Curse and Curse is Liquid, but
no, they're Team Liquid.
9, 1, and 12 on Caitlyn. And just all the kills he got was amazing. CLG did okay this game, but it really wasn't much of a contest as soon as Keith got ramped up.
Yeah, I think Keith earns himself pretty much like a substitute of the century. Like, to have come in there and been so dominant. Yes, they gave him they sort of planned around him in a very positive way. They gave a Protect the Kog'Maw for his first game, so yes, he had to perform, but the entire rest of the team was organized around helping him to perform. So that definitely helped probably calm his nerves a little bit and definitely covered for any mistakes that he may have made. But then when it comes to the second game, it's not quite so protecty, and he still does great. And he was definitely like the carry. He wasn't just treading water. He wasn't just filling a spot. He was showing off. He was telling everybody what he could do. And what he could do was play at the highest levels of the LCS. So I would be shocked if we do not see him get picked up pretty soon.
Yeah, and that's the thing I kind of question is what's Liquid going to do to prioritize keeping him around? Because, yes, you have Piglet. He's probably going to end up being one of the best North American AD carries, pairing up with guys like Doublelift. But when you've got a really good AD carry on your side roster there, like that's a huge risk to losing him to somebody else, especially with all the new teams that are out.
I don't think you really have to worry about Keith or anything like that at this point. Like, sure, he had a really great week one. He worked extremely well in a composition that was built around protecting him. And then in the second game, while the composition wasn't about protecting him, he was playing one of the longest range champions in the game, even though Kog'Maw's W puts him a little bit longer range. Caitlyn is always at that range. And at this point in time, he wasn't the central focus of this composition. There was a Jarvan, there was a Renekton, there was an Annie. There's a lot of commotion up in the front lines that was just keeping him safe in the back lines. And the matter of fact, like a lot of the factors in CLG, such as Smithy in the jungle, not necessarily pulling off the best Rengar. For some reason, it looks like he has a Muramana on my screen. I don't know if that's true or what was going on with that. But So Xfinity in the jungle, not necessarily the best Rengar game, 1-7-5. Link on LeBlanc, once again, didn't really impress us all too much with that. But, I mean...
Aphromoo on Blitz.
Aphromoo on Blitzcrank died a lot, but I think a lot of the circumstances were to kind of save mainly double lift in this circumstance.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the thing of it is...
He got a few good grabs, but at the end of the day, when you look at it, you have an Azir who can just bash you back.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Jarvan who can flag and drag out of it if he doesn't want to get pulled in the first place. And then you have a Renekton.
I mean, CLG went for one of the popular Sivir Run At You compositions, and then Team Liquid in this circumstance went for we're going to cut you off before you can get there, and hey, look, our Caitlyn's never going to die. Keith was a very solid player, very solid AD carry. I don't think there's a lot of worth speculating like, are they going to keep him around? First off, he's on their challenger team, so there's a reason to have him as a sub. He's a registered sub for that team, so no one else can use him as a substitute. I don't know who he would replace in the LCS as far as AD carries are concerned for any team, especially just after week 1. And, I mean, a lot of the hype around this is, man, Team Liquid as a team looked really, really solid. Their compositions were put together well. They had great objective control, great team fights. Yeah, their games went a little bit long this week, but it looked like they knew what they were doing in these games. Now you're going to be adding in the fact that Piglet is a legitimate carry, a legitimate threat. Team Liquid is looking like they can only go up from here.
Yeah. They're only team that went 2-0 in NA this week.
Very surprisingly, too. I did not expect that.
No, not at all. I was expecting TSM to go 1-1, but I was not expecting Cloud9 to go 0-2. But it wasn't all bad for CLG this week. They also managed to pull off a win against Team 8.
Yeah, and the most surprising thing to me in this game was the fact that Team 8, the Cali Troll-centric team that camped top lane against TSM in their second game this week, did nothing to punish CLG's sub Benny and just kind of let him be 0-0 for a long time in this game.
I think Benny held his own.
I mean, Benny held his own, yeah, but his teammate didn't touch him at all. Like, they didn't do anything to top lane. That was, like, the weirdest thing to me. It was like, all right, this is going to be a slaughter because Team 8 is going to have Cali Troll as their captain, their shot caller, the guy who's the ridiculous carry top laner in North America. CLG has Benny, who isn't playing competitively anymore and came out of retirement to sub for 1 week of the LCS with CLG. And, man, this is going to be really, really devastating. And, oh, my God, they got Rek'Sai in this game, too. Like, Rek'Sai's going to camp the crap out of top lane. What is CLG going to do? And Team 8 was just kind of like, yeah, we're gonna let him alone. It was like the most baffling kind of call to me, and Teammates' composition was another one of these compositions that's kind of like question mark, where's the damage? You have Lulu in the mid lane, who in the late game can put out a lot of damage, but she's more of a utility mid laner. Cali Trolls was playing Scion on the top lane. He's a huge tank. Porpoise Pops picked up Rek'Sai, but his only damage item was the Warrior enchantment on his Stalker's Blade, so where's the damage? Annie as your support can provide an okay amount of damage, and then Corki's your AD carry. Corki, lots of mixed magic damage in the early to mid stages of the game. In the late game, notoriously known for not being able to outcarry almost any other AD carry that isn't named non-blue Ezreal. So, like, they just had a composition that didn't scale well at all. I'm looking at CLG. They had Nar and Jarvan, Lissandra, Tristana, and they waited for the game to get to, like, 25 minutes and killed people.
And it's sad, too, because I really like the combo of Lulu and Rek'Sai and Scion, because you can have them run in and then pop them up and then be able to, especially when you have an Annie to pop up, you can send them up. And that's an incredible amount of lockdown. But I don't know. I just don't know about this teammate roster. They didn't really seem to do all that great. And I know Calitros is supposed to be great, but 5-5 and what, like 12 or something like that, I think it was. And there's it's 5-5-3, not even close to 12. Just not impressing me that, not yet at least. I mean, they did beat TSM. We still heard it. It's still ranked proud. And if you notice,
I feel like TSM we're probably not going to get a good indication of what they can do. But even still, just to go 1-1, considering they did beat Cloud9 and that was their victory, pretty shocking. And I don't know what's going on with NA, but to think that Team Liquid, as good as Keith was, I think everybody's in agreement. Piglet's just going to be even better.
Mm-hmm.
Could we be looking at the number one team
think it's way too early to say
to take it all the way to the end. It's quite possible.
I mean, Liquid won't even have access, at least on-stage access, to Skara, which...
No,
now
that's
that
CLG.
I've said that out loud... Or, sorry, CLG. I'm sorry. CLG doesn't even have Skara. I mean, they have them in the off-game time. So I'll be interested to see if there's any effect once he gets on stage. But they also don't have Zion Spartan. So to me, that's going to be a big Week 2 factor for them, is having Zion rejoin. Even though we won't see Skara until Week 3 on stage. But the TSM versus T8 game... I don't even
upset. You sound upset.
I'm upset because, like, Bjergsen did okay, but Sushi just did so much better. I mean, it hit a point where he had enough kills where his Oriana's ultimates was really just wrecking people, and he was picking up double kills, triple kills left and right. And watching Dyrus get just such a focus. I mean, I didn't think that was going to work out for them too much, but it really seemed like Dyrus just couldn't pick up anything. And after almost every fight, Dyrus was just, if he wasn't dying in the fight, he was just barely making it out. And I would hope that TSM has figured out their emotion problems by now, but it doesn't really seem, at least based on these two games, that they've overcome that yet.
I don't think it's really an emotion problem. I think it's just once they get put into a spot where they didn't expect themselves to be, they don't know what to do. So it happened against Unicorns of Love at IEM San Jose, and kind of what happened here. I mean, the big thing of it is Team 8 kind of went back to like a basic, like back to their roots kind of composition, but only instead of going with, like a Lucian or something in the AD carry role, they pair it with the Sivir ultimate, which is going to be able to run at people, which is going to help Oriana, Nocturne, Aurelia catch up to some straggling targets. And I honestly think this Nocturne pickup from Porpoise Pops is a little bit more to his speed. He usually goes for something that's a little bit more farm oriented. He doesn't necessarily gank a lot during the laning phase, at least not when they were back in the challenger scene. And this Nocturne pickup being able to gank once he hits level 6 and being able to be a ball delivery system for Slushy's Oriana, which is one of his more comfortable champions in his pool, I think it's just a really solid Team 8 composition. And I think they tried something fancy in game number 1. They got really punished for it, and they went back to something a little bit more basic against a team that they knew was a lot better than them, and they really stepped it up in this one. Like, Bjergsen himself could not carry them out of the hole in this game. And I mean, maybe if he was on a different champion, maybe if it was a Syndra, maybe if it was an Ahri, but not the LeBlanc, I don't think. LeBlanc in the later stage of the game just doesn't do enough. She can't burst down on Aurelia. Her spell shield on both Sivir and Nocturne is not necessarily the place she wants to be. So TSM, I think they might have also just done the classic TSM thing. They might have just gotten into this game and been overconfident. They might have prepared for Cloud9 and slept on Team 8, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's definitely a possibility, but it'll be really interesting to see how TSM does. And the fact that each team has to play each other twice instead of the 4 times from last season is going to make how this all comes together really interesting, because now that TSM has their one game over Cloud9, they probably won't end up playing them until the very, very end of the season. So they have kind of the rest of those middle-of-the-pack teams to fight against for really the rest of this season. And judging by how TSM did last season, where they could beat every team but the really good ones, except for in the end, that may work out in their advantage, in their favor, but I don't know. With teams like Liquid doing really well and everybody else doing just okay, that's going to be really interesting to see. Speaking of doing just okay, let's talk about Dignitas.
All right, so
since we kind of ruined our ping pong strategy,
I really gotta disagree with that segue, because Dignitas did not do just okay. Dignitas was terrible. Dignitas did not look good. Their first game against Coast probably should have won that game. There was one big reason Coast lost that game, and normally it's the reason Dignitas loses games, and that was Baron. So Coast in this game was in a decent position to win the game for the majority of the game, nobody on Dignitas really kind of stood out to me. Shifter had a decent Azir game, but when Shifter does decent, that's not what Shifter's there to do. Shifter's supposed to be the big carry for the team. He's the mid laner with all this skill, and he could like shut people down and blah 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 blah. But I just didn't see it. His Azir was flashy, but his Azir was good enough to win Dignitas' game when Coast threw it away. Like, I mean,
you know the thing about Coast?
Coast always has the potential to be the better team. It's just they always fall flat. And so it sucks because you watch them and you're like, wow, this game is going great. I love this game. Like, this game is awesome. And then it's like, Coast, what are you doing? And then Ace, and then Baron. And then you're like, crap. Like, that did not work out. But up until they lose the game, they're winning. So...
Skara the Prophet, Zion the Prophet. I think CLG might take.
It was completely illustrated in this game too. Oh man, like I know we gave Chris a lot of flack in the episodes leading up to the LCS, but he performed extremely well this week. His Gnar was 3-0-3. His Aurelia only died at the end of the last game against Winter Fox. Coast. Like, a lot of the Coast problems were, Impaler said in the interview after game number 2 that he and Jesus, because of visa issues, didn't get in until, like, the night before the LCS game started. So they were kind of running on just pure instinct in these games. Their instincts may be a little bit rusty, but if they have the preparation and they have the practice, Coast looks like they could be a solid team. On the opposite side, Dignitas has had the preparation, has had the scrimmaging, and has had the thought process, and they still look sloppy. Really sloppy. And Kid has one of his favorite support picks in the meta again. He's picking Annie. And they still look sloppy.
I don't know. I think Dignitas is one of those teams that's going to be in trouble. I say they do just okay because they did manage to pull it off against Coast and call it Coast throwing. There are definitely teams out there who can take that kind of advantage and still manage to lose. But yeah, I mean, Dignitas is definitely in trouble. I mean, we got to look at it. They had one of the most personality-based rosters. Their roster jived really well together. They had a lot of fun playing the game, and then that got decimated on the way into Season 5. So now we're kind of just looking at the pieces that are Dignitas and wondering where those are all going to fall. And here we are, Week 1. They're not falling very well.
Dignitas' games this week were just a bit underwhelming, and I honestly, I kind of feel like with this team...
Wait. You expected to be whelmed?
I expected them against Coast and Impulse to, like... I expected them to win the Coast game, but not in the fashion that they won it in. And I expected them to maybe win the Impulse game, but Impulse just... They blew them to smithereens. Like... I don't know. Shifter had another okay game on LeBlanc. He was 2-0-1, but like the bottom lane of Dignitas just doesn't really seem to have a lot of togetherness. I mean, Core is dying a lot. He was 3-3 in his Corki game. He's 0-2 in the Sivir game. He doesn't seem to have a lot of impact on the map. I don't know if it's just the pairing with him and Kid, or I don't know if it's just Core. I mean, back when Core was in, I believe it was Big File Miracle. I could be completely wrong with this one, but the team was one of those 0-3 teams in the OGN group stages. People always said Core is this great solo Q80 carry. He has a lot of potential. When he gets on stage and he gets in the game, there's no cohesiveness. They don't work together well. Like, maybe he chokes on land. I don't know. But, I mean, for the detriment of my fantasy team and for Team Dignitas here, I'm really hoping they kind of step it up. Like, maybe it's just week 1 jitters. Maybe it's the teams knew what they were going to be picking in these certain situations. But, like, the players seem to all just be in this mind state where they're doing all right in their lanes, but they don't have, like, global impact, and you can't win a game like that. Like, Elements does that decently for the first 15 to 20 minutes of the game, but even then, Nif and Shook are doing things on the map. Crumbs isn't able to get that same amount done. Kiwi Kid dies when he tries to do that. And then the influence on Elements, it falls to Froggen, and Shifter is not Froggen, and he can't make those things happen because Shifter's always too afraid of messing up.
Right. Well, Coast really threw that game, and that was pretty embarrassing for them, but it wasn't all that bad this week. They did manage to pull off a win against Winter Fox.
House Winter Fox. So, This game was a little upsetting for me because Winter Fox kind of fell apart after I think their excitement from their victory on day number 1. First off, we have to preface the fact that House Winter Fox has 3 substitute players. Flares from Enemy Esports is in the top lane. Shorter Ace, formerly of Final 5, part of Team Brawl, is in the jungle. And Glebe, who is formerly on Fusion, is playing as their support player. So basically they have Pobelter and Altec and a bunch of their friends playing together on the team right now. Game number 2 against Coast, nothing really seemed to work. Shorter Ace and Flares just died a lot. And it was pretty much game from there. Pobelter wasn't really able to do anything. He wound up also dying a lot. And Altec kind of went into that, well, I'm on Tristana, I'm a hyper carry, I need to sit in the back, guys, don't let me die. And he would not die, picked up a couple kills, but everybody else on his team just died a lot.
Glebe was Glebe in that game.
Glebe was not even a huge problem in that game. His Nami was 0-4-6. He's stuck next to Altec in almost every single fight except for the last catch at the end of the game. It was just the fact that
catches. It wasn't just the catch at the end of the game.
There was nothing that they could do at that point, though. There's a 10-1-8 Aurelia, a 10-0-8 Aurelia until they wound up diving the fountain at the end and they picked up a kill on her. Yeah. A 4-1-11 Corki that's going to be punishing Tristana's weak mid-game. They had a Xerath with 3 kills and 12 assists, almost at full build. They had a Jarvan diving on to absolutely everybody. There was nothing that Glebe and Altec could do in that game when the rest of their team fed a combined 18 kills to the enemy team.
Yeah, Aurelia is not a champion that you can let get fed in any sense of the word. Like, even just her getting Trinity Force, depending on where they are in the game, is a really tough situation. And Chris just went ham.
Yeah, like I said, I was really impressed with the way Chris played this week. Didn't expect it whatsoever. Pleasantly surprised.
Mm-hmm. They did topple over. Winter Fox did beat Gravity.
Winter Fox against Gravity was a kind of interesting game for me because this is the game I expected Winter Fox to lose, but Winter Fox actually won. And this is the game where it's kind of like, man, like Winter Fox playing with these subs, playing with like Altec, Pobelter, and the boys, seem to be doing pretty well. Flares played a decent Renekton game. Shorter Ace ganked Pobelter in mid lane a lot, and Pobelter snowballed off of it. Altec got into the later stages of the game and racked up a ton of kills, and Winter Fox kind of ran over Gravity. And I was like, yes, House Winter Fox, Stormers of the Rift, champions of their first game of the NALCS. And they
went to the Red Wedding.
Yeah, and then they got completely murdered. Like, it's exactly what happened. This game, I think it was more Gravity underpreparing compared to Winter Fox. I think Winter Fox kind of had the number on Gravity in this one. You saw a lot of ganks focused in the mid lane. You saw like 3-man ganks in mid multiple times, making sure Pobelter was so far ahead of Keen that Keen had to buy a QSS to drop the fish off of him. Like, I just kind of feel like they put Keen on tilt. Saint had to focus mid lane so much to try to get him off of tilt that the rest of the map just didn't really matter. Altec and Flares were able to run away with it because then Shorter Ace was able to go multiple other places. All of a sudden, Pobelter was joining fights. We saw roams from Pobelter down bottom lane, resulting in a double or a triple kill rather early into the mid stages of the game. It was just kind of like... The problem is with this game, it looked like a solo queue game, which is, I think, worked well for Winter Fox because it was a team full of subs, whereas the game against Impulse did not look like solo queue at all, and Winter Fox fed their asses off.
Right. Well, man, we've been going for a while now. We just didn't stop.
Yeah.
So this has been quite a week one. There's so many questions we have unanswered. I was really hoping we'd be able to get some solid info, especially on the North American side. But with all the subs, with all the games and the ways they went, we still don't know anything about these teams.
Just root for Team Liquid and Fnatic, and I don't think you can go wrong. Like, they'll wind up top 4 either way they go about it.
I'm really hoping for a lot more out of Cloud9 because I feel like as soon as you start to go on a downfall with Cloud9, it's not going to be like we'll just make a roster swap and that'll fix everything. I think it is a chaotic slide towards the bottom and I don't know. I
don't know. They didn't do all too well in the second split of last season, but they wound up in first place.
You shall see. We shall see. Well, this has been the T-Force LCS Rundown, episode 46. We're coming up on 50 soon. We're almost old.
We are
start
old.
asking for senior discount for shit. I love that. So join us next week, Sunday, shortly after 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I know I won't be there because it's the Super Bowl and my team is kind of playing, so I'm going to be probably a little bit under the weather. But who knows? We'll see. We'll see if we make that episode or if we reschedule, because I know a lot of people are going to probably want to watch the Super Bowl. So we'll see.
I'll be watching. Sure.
But week 2 will be good. Week 2 is going to be exciting. There's a lot we have coming out. So this has been the T-Force LCS Rundown, a part of the Trinity Force Network. I'm sure Adam will say all of his stuff about the show after this for you out in podcast land. But thanks, and Tom, take us out.